you guys have sort of been under the radar, so maybe for the benefit of everybody here, can you tell us who you are and what do you guys do? I mean, we know you have a beautiful building in Roslyn as we cross the Key Bridge.
This is that should be an easier question. So the advice every entrepreneur has gotten is, get your elevator pitch down. We're still working. Give you a sense of how bad this is. About 20 years ago now, when the company was tiny, I left a profession that was already hard to describe. I was a consultant. In the words of my dad, who would pay you for advice on anything? And I left that, which mystified my parents, to come work for this business that really was hard to describe, and I would travel a lot, and I'd talk to different people. My mom concluded that since I was moving to Washington, I had joined the CIA. Quite literally. This is not a sort of funny joke. She assumed anyone who lives in Washington, travels, and can't describe what they do must actually be a CIA agent. This had a hidden benefit. I'm the youngest of 30 plus first cousins, big Irish family in Boston. So I got kicked around as a kid, right? It was great. No one touches me in my family anymore. They all think I'm some dangerous CIA agent. What CEB does is helps the biggest companies in the world run themselves more effectively. We do that in a few ways. We help them close insight gaps, helping leaders of key corporate functions figure out what they want to do, benchmark their success, identify opportunities, and tap into our resource base to move the company forward. We help them get the right people into the right jobs to succeed. If you have a strategy, that's one thing, but if you don't have the people to execute it, you're likely to fail. And the third thing we do is help those people succeed by giving them the tools and resources to do their jobs well. We do this for we used to say we do it for 95% of the Fortune 100 and similar sized companies. We actually crossed the threshold of every single one of the Fortune 100 buys from us officially this year. 90% of the Fortune 500. And pretty much, if you went across the developed markets globally, you'd find roughly similar penetrations of, let's say, the FTSE 100 or the Dow Jones Asian Titans or the CAC 40 or the DAX. So of the world's largest companies, about 90% are doing at least a couple of things on our platform and using our tools to run themselves. So that's kind of what we do.
Fantastic. And you've been there going on 20 years, right? So when the company's changed a lot. I was telling Tom a little story earlier that in the mid to late 80s, I applied for a job at what was then the advisory board company, and CEB was part of it. And everyone I met at the company was like twice as smart as I was, and I didn't get a job offer.
Our mistake, right?
But at the time, you were all.
How big we'd be if you had.
At the time, if you didn't have a Harvard degree, it was hard to even get an interview there, right? So. But back then, you were in a small office on Capitol Hill. Now you're building this 350,000 square foot headquarters in Roslyn. But talk about sort of when you joined the company, what got you into the company? I know you were with Accenture and Deloitte, but why did you take a chance to go with a small little company? And then how did, it's not a startup by any means, but it was a much smaller company, and how have you seen business change?
Sure. It was the story of how I ended up at the company is relevant actually because it illustrates what I still think is the most powerful thing about our business model. I was working consulting for one of the major firms, and I got together with, I was going actually on a double date. My now wife, then girlfriend, are going out with friends, and the other male in the equation was someone I didn't know. We happened to get there early. We got into a discussion about work. He was at one of the other major consultancies, and we got into a conversation around what bugged us about consulting. It's a great profession, but there were some things that didn't suit us, didn't suit our personalities, and we said, some subset of what the consulting firms were doing neither served them from an economic perspective, nor served the teams, nor served the clients. And we sort of had a beer, talked about it, ended with something along the lines of, well, what are you going to do? You can't fight City Hall. About a year later, he gave me a call and said, you know what, I'm talking to this really tiny company in DC that may offer a platform for us to start to build against the conversation we had. And what the idea behind it is probably best illustrated by one of my last assignments as a consultant. I was working for one of the major consultancies. we built a tool that allowed treasurers at multinationals to forecast cash flows and then net out currency hedges, basically create internal hedge systems. So they didn't spend money with banks. They saved money. If you could consolidate your cash profiles, you could save a lot of money with your banks. Mm-hmm. So the only way we could sort of monetize that was to sell engagements. Yeah. Go pitch somebody. We had the tool. It existed, and every treasurer in the world should have had it on their desktop the next day after we built it. And this model, the idea that at any company, there's a senior executive or their team that is working on a problem that everyone else with their job has animated us ever since. So walk into any general counsel's office globally, they're worried about, how do I manage my outside law firms? How do I know who's good or bad? How do I know where I'm getting good value for money? How do I not? They can solve that problem themselves. They can get in our platform, benchmark, and learn. Walk into any head of HR's office. Succession management for the top 50 positions is a critical issue. Again, they can try to solve that problem themselves, or they can plug into a database of 1,000 other companies that gives them data about succession, success, and failure. You kind of walk around the executive suite, and that big simple idea that any senior executive, any senior professional in the major corporate functions at any large company is working on something that literally thousands of other people are working on at that point, is a pretty powerful insight. You can build a lot of business opportunity against that. And we've continued to do that. And that the bigger our company gets, the bigger that opportunity looks, which is great.
Right. And how do you identify the areas? You're in so many different parts of a company's enterprise. You're in HR, IT, finance, legal. How do you identify what niches to attack?
Sure. Yeah, we sell into 5 major areas of the large company. So to us, a Boeing or a GE or a HSBC really looks like 5 different companies. HR, finance, IT, sales and marketing, and legal and compliance. So each one of them has a senior executive. They have a big team of professionals underneath them. They have a set of recurring workflows, things they do every year. And we just go looking for, we have a couple of questions we ask every time we think about launching a product or building a new service line. One, if we solve this problem, does it save them real money? Just, what's the ROI on solving this problem from this? We call them big dollar problems. This is a big dollar problem. 2, does it recur? We like subscription businesses, and the closer you get to, they're going to have this problem every year. Every year they're going to do sales territory planning. Come rain, come shine, recession, boom times. Every head of sales globally every year goes out and says, who gets what territory? Who gets matched against what set of opportunities? We look and say, is there an asset we can put at the center that scales? So is it, in essence, is it shared? Is there some way in which sales territory planning is common from company A to company B? Because if it's not, we can't actually build a scale asset at the center that makes the business compelling, doesn't let us win. And then 4th, we go looking for, at the end of the day, can we build a solution that delivers huge multiples of return? We don't go. We always say, from our customer perspective, we're not in a singles and doubles business. We're out there to ensure that every time they spend $1 with us, they're getting a sort of $50 return. Because it's actually kind of hard to go to somebody and say, I'd like to believe we're all totally rational. If someone walked into our office and said, if you give me $1, I'll give you $1.04 back. It's great. You could do that all day long and be incredibly successful. The reality of selling in a B2B environment is the way that actually works inside a large company is, we have a committee that actually examines this, and wait a minute, I don't have a single, let me go find to see if I have a single. If it's a full $1, I have to check with my CFO because it's for 99 cents. Suddenly this really complex sales process unfolds, and we look and say, gosh, if we walk in and say, give me $1, I'll give you 50 back, that's where we get excited. So those are criteria we look at and say, big dollar problems, potential to have a best by country mile solution, shared problem, and does it recur? Is it something someone works on every year, every quarter, every week?
So you sound just like a tech company in the sense that big markets, recurring revenue, big pain, and scalability. In essence, although your product is a more of a financial, intellectual product. So I was reading one of your blogs on LinkedIn, and you talked about when you come up with these solutions, right? The answer has to be right, and it has to be, you said, I think, counterintuitive to conventional wisdom. How do you find the solution for your customer that is different from what everyone else is thinking? And I think you said that's the hardest part of finding the answer.
Yeah, you know, it's our, if philosophically what we'd say is, look, and I think back to the hard to describe our company, we're 99.999% of our delivery is on technology platforms. So the amount that we actually are believers that people are an important part of our business system, but the predominant way people access what we do is through online tools, portals, benchmarking databases, analytics engines. They plug into their own system. So the people portion of what we do is critical, but we're technology. Technology enables us to deliver at a scale we couldn't actually if we had to rely on people. Was it Gibson who said the future's always here? It's just unevenly distributed. Is that And I think when we look for when we're looking for the breakthrough idea, our installed base of customers, somebody somewhere is working on something that is game breaking, and our job is, I think. When we innovate, I don't know. We've grown the company a lot, so we're obviously an innovative company. We're looking back, and when we went public in '99, I think we're give or take 15 times the size we were then. We're probably 25, 30 times the size when probably even more than that from I got that phone call. So we've continued to grow across a long period of time. We don't innovate by sitting in a room with a whiteboard, talking to each other, taking gentle sips of our own bathwater. We innovate by going and talking to the best customer base in the world. If you had 100% of the Fortune 100 as your customers, somebody's doing something cool. And the fact that we've got access to their performance data, you see the anomalies. You say, well, what is Southwest Airlines doing there? That looks really cool. That's a totally different outcome than we're seeing everywhere else. What is it? Siemens is doing something really interesting there. That outcome is different. And so I think we think of innovation and that sort of leading edge thinking as a process of co-creation with our customer base. If we're humble enough to admit we probably don't have the answer, and we're honest enough to go out and ask questions of the world, and humble enough actually to say, I'm not sure I 100% understand why that's happening, can you tell me what's going on? You'll come up with some pretty powerful ideas. I think humility as a driver of innovation is often underrated. So admitting we don't know, admitting that 5 of our people in a room may be incredibly smart, we may have the best whiteboards going, but collectively the 10,000 companies we sell to globally might add a little something to our thinking, and we should ask them. Turns out to be a pretty important principle.
Yeah. So you talked about innovation, and creating a culture of innovation, I think, is a challenge that everybody, all the CEOs in this room, probably share. I don't know if you've done research into how do you create or sustain a culture of innovation, but I'm curious how you do it as the leader of CEB. How have you been able to continually reinvent and stay current?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things. There's some data that says we're spending a lot of time. Arguably have the most management science around people and organizations in the world. One fun fact, we're the largest civilian employer of psychologists in the world. So we spend a lot of, you can file that in the blessing, curse. But
of your 4,000, how many are psychologists?
Several hundred. And because the analytics of work turn out, these are industrial organizational psychologists have been building a canon of data and research and science around how people work. And I think there's three things that we think make kind of, at least on our best days, activate innovation. One is newer. I'll get into the two we've always done and one that's newer to us. One is that customer-facing, I'll call it humility. Tell me what you're working on. Tell me what's hard. How have you solved it? What do you wish just the questions you can ask, getting everyone out there, talking to and engaging with the customer base is far and away the most important engine. Because if you're humble enough and you listen enough, they'll tell you what their pain points are. They'll tell you what's worked and what hasn't. They'll call your attention to an experiment they're excited about. There's so much going on. They'll call your attention to, I'd say every M&A transaction we've ever done at some point was one of our customers calling us and saying, you got to meet these guys. They're doing interesting work for us, or they're not doing interesting work for us, but their pitch is really interesting. You could refine them. So our customer network as a sensing organism for innovation can't be overstated, and wiring your organization to be focused there. Second is collaboration. I'd put humility there. That we joke internally, but I'm like, pull out your business card, read it. Are you Steve Jobs? Okay, no, you're not. Then get with a team and bring the best thinking to bear on this product. If your business card reads Steve Jobs, go ahead and build it. Like I'll tell the tech organization to do whatever you tell them to. I'll tell everyone in the company to get behind you. If it doesn't say Steve Jobs, go get people who complement your skills, complement your perspective, and hash it out and iterate against that market. Bring it to the market fast. And then third, I'd say we're getting smarter about plugging into and building an innovation ecosystem. So you've seen us get much more active over the past 4 years in terms of venture investment. We bought some basically pre-revenue companies really to get the people in, partnering more actively with both companies big and small, because we find sometimes our peanut butter tastes excellent, their chocolate tastes excellent. Only by getting together do we create the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. So the third leg of that stool increasingly is for us, it's our Ventures at Work program. Now we're, one of my VC friends said, you guys are interested in companies that no one in Silicon Valley is. That's a compliment to me, because it's, we're B2B hardcore, like super hardcore enterprise guys. So when someone says it's like, it's Facebook, but for rabbits. I'm like, I don't like it's, but not all rabbits. Ones who live in cages, not the forest bunnies. They're like, the kind of Silicon. We're B2B people, so we really hardcore B2B people. When someone says, I'm all about helping someone, whittle dollars off their accounts payable process. We're like, ooh, sexy. One of our senior leaders, this maybe tell you more about our company than you'd want to know, but one of our senior leaders was interviewing somebody, and we had the classic debrief meeting where we were talking about the person, and I forget what the role was, but this is an actual quote. I'll leave the person unnamed. He said, I really liked him. We had a great conversation. He had some really great ideas, but I got to tell you, when we stopped talking about accounts payable, he got really boring. And everyone at CEB, that people all are like, oh yeah, I can see that. AP is so exciting. The second you get off that, but that's kind of, unfortunately, that's the sort of stuff we do. We help help CFOs run their organizations well. So you gotta be boring. No.
Do you find people with that passion for these little niches, or do you train them on it? Do you have a way to, stimulate their excitement?
Yeah. The cool thing is, so maybe accounts payable is an extreme. We do work on incredibly cool stuff. So if you lift one click up from accounts payable, you look and say, we help CEOs make their companies more capital efficient. We reduce their dependence on sources of external capital. We help them self-fund innovation. That people like that. Yes. That's really exciting. You get that. The math that tends to motivate our people is, when we ring the bell, when we come up with something like we did a lot of work on. One of our big areas of focus is commercial effectiveness, and so selling. Turns out, when we were really a tiny company, I remember something went horribly wrong trying to sell a product. Like, I forget what it was. It was at least half my fault, if not more than half my fault. Or it was all my fault. But anyway, somebody was trying to share the blame with me. But we were sitting there, and they'd gone. My colleague Peter looked at me and said, 4 years of business school between us, give or take what would have been a couple $100,000 in today's money, and not a single class in sales management. Right? I mean, look at the business school curriculum at most business schools, and there's a class in sales, maybe two. Mm-hmm. Who here is going to try to sell something today? I am. I'm going to go try to sell some stuff today. That's what business is. It's selling stuff. So we put a lot of energy into the quantification, the science, and the instrumentation of sales, because we think that really, really, really matters. And what motivates our people is, if we find a right answer, and when one of what you may have seen out about this book, The Challenger Sale, written by a couple of my colleagues, which summarize some of our massive data sets on sales performance. If you get that right, if you help someone run their sales organization 5% better, you're dropping,
that's huge.
For our customer base, literally hundreds of millions of dollars to the bottom line of a Fortune 500 company. If you do that for, that's one company. If you do it for the whole Fortune 500, you're talking $1 billion impact on the economy. That's what motivates our people, is the ability to kind of, and we do a lot, what we talk about a lot internally is, by the year 2020, more or less 1 billion people will get up and go to work in a company that uses our tools to run itself. Just big round numbers, either directly in the company or in a key part of its supply chain. So we have the ability, if we help their leaders set good directions, make good investments, create great work environments, to help 1 billion people thrive at work. I think that gets pretty exciting. And frankly, not good. If you go back down to the CFO team, they say our role here is to help the CFO make sure this enterprise is funded, because nothing good happens if it runs out of money. And if running AP better is part of that, great, let's crush it. So I think that keeping everyone focused on, we're all lugging bricks around any day, right? We're all dirty and carrying a stone up the hill. Keeping everyone focused on the cathedral you're building is what you're trying to do.
Fascinating. Regarding venture investments and acquisitions, can you talk about what you're looking for in terms of segment or technology, and some of the investments that you've made over the years?
Sure.
The good and the bad?
The good and the bad. I'll start with the bad. I was telling somebody last week, I was trying to prove I knew something about something, which is talking about lugging a rock uphill. I said, you have to hear me out on this one. I'm one of the few people who's ever sold a B2B social network for more than $10 million. There's LinkedIn, obviously, Jeff and Reed, and us. And I said, the unfortunate news is I paid more than 60 for it. So by the time I sold it, it was only worth about 10. I'd say first and foremost, you know as well as I do, we've talked about this, if you don't have failures, you don't have successes. Right. So there's I look at that with just one example, a company called IT Toolbox that was actually a great idea. I'm still very close to the guys who founded it and sold it and ran it for us. We ended up in a business which was a great platform, but didn't have a revenue model we added value to. It was It was an ad-based business at its core, and we kind of, you can see the dents on both sides of the car from my driving it into one guardrail, then driving it back over into the other. Because at first I said, let's embrace the revenue model it has and try to make it better. We couldn't do that, so I said, oh, let's totally change the revenue. Let's do the exact opposite of what I just said and hit it. So I think our failures to some degree have refined, but they'll never perfect what we're looking for. We love, our criteria are pretty simple for anything we might be involved in. We love things sold into those buying centers of large companies, because if we own something, we are gonna within 100 days walk into the CFO of half the Fortune 500's office and tell them about it, and it has to meet that threshold of the CFO of a big company is going to look and say, yeah, I need that, or the head of HR, or so that's the first most important thing. Second, we go looking for things that have distinctive intellectual property at the center. It's funny, we get, we're a public company. We got public only by the incredibly low standards of 1999. Should we have been a public company? Like the, when sushibymail.com was getting funded, will the sushi still be good when it gets there in 3 days? Oh, yeah, it'll be fine. We have a 70% customer retention rate. The other 30% die of food poisoning. But we got and our investors sort of struggle. Are you a software company? And we say, look, we enjoy the economics of a software company. You're not wrong to think of it that way. But what we are first and foremost a content company. Great content. Often software creates content. Often software is a means of access to the content. But at the core, we love data. We love analytics. We shouldn't ever be a great system of record creators. So we go looking for businesses that have at their core data analytics content of some sort that makes that head of HR, CFO more successful at his or her job. And we go looking usually for, I think it's actually true. I don't think we've ever, I'll overstate this, but we want to be in business with any company that we invest in or acquire. And there are a lot of people you don't want to sit next to on a plane. I'll just put it that way. And so, one of the scenarios when we're thinking of an investment is, we're coming back from the Minneapolis office. It's snowing. You're stuck at MSP with the two people who are running this thing. You are excited, ordering a beer and chatting. B, hiding. C, making an excuse and driving to Rochester, Minnesota just to get away from them. Because we want our goal is we don't want to be the other side of someone's flip. We go looking for teams we want to build a business with. Look at Talent in our own business that we acquired last year that's been hugely successful for us. Our first meeting, we walked out of that saying, gosh, we want to be in business with those guys. We want to be in business with Vijay and Vamsi. I almost don't care what the product is. I just want to work. I want to share ideas and go out and talk to customers and engage and see what we can come up with. So that third one really matters. We have to really want to be in business with people, because back to my collaboration point, if you're buying something, I always say, the phrase we use internally is, who's got the keys to the spaceship? Anytime you buy something, you have to assume you've bought a spaceship you don't know how to fly. Because if the business is successful and it's not yours, presume you don't know what makes it great. You don't run to the store, buy a Swiss watch and say, let me take it apart and see how it works. If you're only buying Swiss watches, you buy things that work, and you usually try to get people in. So that third one of, are these people we want to be in business with, really matters to us hugely.
Is that number one, do you think?
It becomes number one because you don't know until you have 3 conversations, right? It starts with, wow, they've got, it usually starts with our customer at XYZ company calls us and says, these folks were just in my office It's funny. There's been a sea change that I think has helped us a little bit, which is 5 years ago the call was, these guys were just in my office. Cool idea. I'm going to do a little work with them, but at some point I'm going to find a way to introduce you because they should be on your platform. I would buy more of this if it came from you. The conversation now, which is interesting, is these guys were just in my office. It's cool. For me to buy their stuff, I would have to fill out 174 pages of paperwork from our data security department. And I'm too old for that stuff. So, I'm going to suggest, you guys are already special cleared through, you're in our compliance files, all that stuff. My suggestion to them was, I'd like to do business with them, but I can't fill out any 174-page documents anymore. My life's too short. So we found increasingly large companies are getting a little more risk averse and forcing us into conversations because they'll get excited about a tool but say, there's just no way I'm going to go have my data privacy guys visiting their data center. I'm just not going to go through it. So, my data privacy guys have gone to your data center 4 times. We have 8 data centers, and they're in perpetual loops. We have literally 3 people in our company who spend all their time working with our customers on issues like data privacy and IT security, because it's such a huge issue. But if you're cleared and you have that relationship and you can have those conversations, it can become a powerful accelerant to someone else's business. So we like that.
Are most of your investments acquisitions and control positions, or I'm aware of a couple of minority investments you've made, right?
Yeah.
You're willing to make corporate venture investments?
We do. We tend to be. We have a program called Ventures at Work that we're just kind of some of the companies that are working with us. It's like early stage squared. It's like early stage for us, and we do early stage stuff. So it's like early stage squared. And we're advancing against that. I think we have a philosophical point there. What's funny is we've been financially successful at it, which I regard as neither good nor bad, just an accident of measurement at a point in time. We are not venture capitalists. Our shareholders don't want us to be venture capitalists. Our shareholders want us to grow our businesses and make money for them. They don't give us capital to invest in our business. They don't give us capital to speculate. So the needle we're always trying to thread is we want to be learning, right? We want to put capital to work only where we're willing to put people to work. If we're not spending time, co-developing a product or coming up with a licensing strategy or co-innovating in some way, capital's free, right? It won't always be, and a lot of folks in this room know capital's free right now and have lived through times when capital isn't free, but capital's free right now, like just totally free. I've got teenage kids, as you know, and trying to explain to them, why you'd ever keep money in a checking account or a savings account is so far beyond me. I'm like, if you put in just $5 each week, at the end of the year, you'll have $250, and if you just leave it there a year from now, you'll have $250.40. So capital is the flip side of the balance sheet, but capital is effectively free. So our money, no better than anyone else's, comes in the same standard denominations through the same wire transfers. If we're working with someone, we will put capital to work as a kind of, relationship cementer, and that's how we think about it. We asked Dan Frawley. Dan ran the CONNECTpreneur business. That's our consumer research business, and this was his third exit. And back to the point of we wanted to work with Dan. Dan's taken hold of this program because he's been there, done that a few times.
Yes.
And Dan now sort of sits across and coaches, mentors. CEB's ambassador to this world and ambassador from CEB back in, ambassador from that world back into CEB. But we tend to say, look, we want to, same criteria that we use for an M&A, best by a country mile, intellectual property at the center, sold to one of our things, and we kind of want to do something together. And the PayScale, the company out in Seattle that has really innovative and compelling comp benchmarking database. But part of the reason we invested there is we have take slices of their data, package it up in some of our products, and send it out. And that's a classic example. It's been a great investment, great management team. Mike Metzger and his team are terrific. But that's a great example of where we would be at work in a venture investing situation.
Fascinating. So your role as CEO is a little different than when you were heading up research, right? I know you have a very deep and long passion for the data, the research, the findings, the recommendations. How much of your day is spent on the product side and getting your hands dirty versus sort of leading this global behemoth?
It's funny. I was doing a town hall somewhere, and our employees are so great. Our team members are such smart colleagues. The thing that gets me out of work in the morning is working with smart colleagues. Back to the stuck in the Minneapolis airport, like the fact that in all but the rarest of circumstances, stuck in an airport with one of my colleagues is exciting because I love talking to him. But really smart young analytics guy raises his hand, asks me a question. He sort of asked, I love the way I love the question. I love the way he said it. He said, "What do you do?" And it was great. It was great because it's like the unspoken second half of the sentence is, comma, because it's obviously not anything the rest of us care about. You don't make the product, you don't sell it, right? You just think of, most great companies are do two things well. Most B2B companies, they make the product and sell it. And there is no third, right? And I'm a third, whatever that is. Like, I don't make it, I don't sell it anymore. I try to help make it and sell it. I spend time on 5 buckets of activity. I spend time with our people. We get people in 50 plus offices globally. The sun quite literally never sets on the CEB empire, which is exciting. And traveling and seeing people, learning from them about what works about our business, learning what doesn't work about our business, is a joy. There isn't a day when I do that where I don't sort of have 3 amazing insights into our business.
Like an internal consultant.
Yeah, just walking around, talking with people, asking them, just having a great. I'm like as boring as that accounts payable guy. So I have no actual hobbies, but one of my actual hobbies is collecting great questions to ask people, right? What are questions that I love to curate and collect great questions? And sometimes our internal social media network, I'm like, okay, what's the best question you've asked a customer this week or that got you the best response? What's the best question a colleague's asked you? I love to curate questions, but walking around and saying, what would the harshest critic of our company say about us? What would, the most stinging customer criticism, what was the hardest word in that sentence? Just getting that stuff back from your people is amazing. Second is spending time with customers. Again, I'm basically an empty suit at this point. So I really have to break time with customers into 2 buckets. One is with our teams, advancing relationships where I can be helpful. Once in a while, I actually still know something, and someone will bring me into a situation. Once in a while, someone will just want to help me engage an organization at a broader level. I also try to mystery shop our product, which is really hard in a B2B environment. I remember having this conversation. I was on a board for years with Dave Dillon, who ran Kroger, which, thousands of stores, right? We're talking about mystery shopping. And Dave looks at me and says, I just put a baseball hat on. Like, you walk into any store, no one knows who, the CEO of, you just put a baseball hat on and walk in and just walk around and start asking questions on mystery shopping. It's a little harder to mystery shop a B2B company, right? You're known to your people, but I do try to, as much as I can, to find ways to sort of mystery shop, because what's it like to be a customer of CEB? It's hard. So I try to sneak in and see customers and don't tell the account manager. stuff. So customer activity is the second bucket. Third bucket is we are a public company and we do spend time with actual and prospective investors. We've been blessed in having, it's a trope for your average public company CEO to moan about all the bad stuff about being public. And I can give you the woe is me and quarterly pressure and oh, my life is so hard, and my driver was 3 minutes late. All the public company CEO junk. If the capital markets didn't exist, I'd have to invent them, right? You need. It's great to have external measures of performance and collective external measures of performance that you can point to, and comparability and all the things you kind of want is trying to build a high-performing organization. We've been lucky we've had great investors, but I spend time with them. And so Rich and I will spend time on the road visiting actual investors, potential investors, talking to we about sell-side coverage of about 8. We've also been blessed with good sell-side coverage. The analysts who cover our company really do invest time to understand what we do, which is great. And we love to, you want to demo our product? I want to demo our product. I was visiting one of the big fund companies. They said, we'd like to arrange a demo. And I just pulled out my laptop and said, okay, now, let's go. And I couldn't decide whether this was a compliment to the product our team had built or a stinging rebuke of every CEO they meet with. But they said, we've never seen a CEO actually use his or her own product before. I think that from the startup community back, as you think about from the run from entrepreneurship to scale company, somewhere that gets lost. And I think if the answer to that question from my vantage point is ever, let me get my senior vice president of product demo for investors to call you, and we'll arrange a WebEx with our special demo team. Push me in front of a car. I mean, just like that's. I don't want to run that company. I obviously spend in the people category. I spend time on the product. That's really important to me. I can sometimes still create value because we now actually are test bed for what we do. Fourth and fifth categories, we're a public company, so there's governance stuff ranging from working with the audit firm, working with the board. That's an important part of what we do. Keeping the board active. We have a fantastic board. They're totally engaged. I finally had to admit to them that I didn't see them as a board of directors. I saw them as incredibly valuable, underpaid labor. Because a board of directors is cheap. They're really cheap. And if you spend time and energy cultivating a great board of directors, I've got 7 incredibly awesome people who are totally underpaid for the amount of stuff I asked them to do. And I finally had to fess up to them because next week I've got a couple of board members presenting at a customer event. I have board members who will review products. I have board members who sit with our cybersecurity team outside the board side. They love to be involved, and I think that's a huge blessing. And then fifth, spending time in our ecosystems, spending time with partners, spending time with interesting companies, swapping stories. What are you seeing? What are we seeing? So those are the 5 buckets of activity. Ultimately, what I do with them is I allocate people and resources, make decisions about people and organization. I allocate capital and operating expense. That's all those 5 things, all that activity produces maybe 6 decisions a year.
Fantastic. What do you guys see as your greatest challenge, in the next 5 years? You got some pretty tough competition out there. Where are you going to be focused?
One of the things we've talked about this, we're putting a lot of energy into is what I'll call adding rigor and analytic depth to decisions about talent. The saddest statistic I've come across in the past couple of years is your average fantasy sports player spends, I think, 6 hours and consults 4 distinct sources of information before making a decision about any player on any one of their teams. Am I going to trade? Am I going to start DeMarco Murray, or is ankle hurting him type stuff? I got to check and make sure, see if I can get some inside scoop on his ankle. your average corporate manager, I'll just put it gently, spends less time making decisions about his or her team. I'll just leave it out there. And so we've been really pushed into this by our customers. And it's not an HR problem. It's heads of sales come to us and have been saying, okay, as between 3 salespeople, who should I hire? As between those 3 salespeople, who should be in a relationship management role versus a hunter role? Who should be in a call center versus out in the field? Who should sell complex solutions versus narrower point activity? The amount of analytic rigor put behind those decisions is less than 0. It's based on interviews. It's inconsistently done. It's not tracked back to any set of outcomes. It's not in kind of wash, rinse, repeat. Think about every role inside a large company. Who should be working on a corporate IT help desk versus manning the firewall? Who should be all these decisions? Who should be in a call center? Who should not be in a call center? Who should be in a marketing department? Who should be out in an oil rig? You think about our scientists would say, look, ability to follow a safety protocol is a documentable, measurable human behavior. So you're putting someone into a plant. Wouldn't you want to know, if it's dealing with hazardous substances, whether they have a high or low propensity to follow instructions? So that richness of that question our members have brought that and placed it squarely on our doorstep. And so we made a couple acquisitions. We built a bunch of businesses to help bring some instrumentation and analytics to human capital decisions, both around individuals and at scale, different populations. So one of our tools. I'll use fraud as an example. I'll go. This is one of those things where someone's going to say, I'd rather be talking to the accounts payable guy than Tom because it's about to get so boring. But the UK, very simple example, the UK banking regulators come out and said, look, y'all banks are a bunch of rascals. Every bank, that's what every banking regulator around the world sort of has a y'all are rascals policy. I don't think in the UK they say y'all, but that's kind of what they mean. So we want evidence that you are taking steps to raise the ethical conduct of your company. And ethical conduct's a measurable activity, right, at scale. Ethical conduct is, how many misfilings, how many undocumented activities go on. And so we have a tool that kind of allows you as an organization to look across your entire enterprise and say, where is propensity for misconduct high? Based on individual behaviors, but also on team behaviors. It's great, right? If you're running a bank, you say, gosh, running a brokerage firm, that particular location, East Tulsa versus West Tulsa, East Tulsa versus Fremont, whatever, has a higher propensity for ethical misconduct. You can do the same thing for a manufacturer. There are going to be more safety violations at plant X than plant Y. These are tools we've built that help people run these enterprises. And if you're running compliance, if you're running manufacturing, if you're running HR, the ability to say, okay, I got to change that team, I got to change the leader, I got to rotate people, I got to get someone from East Tulsa over to work in West Tulsa because East Tulsa is going great. So those questions of adding analytics, depth, and rigor to decisions about people is really, of that 3 things we do: help leaders set direction, help them get the right people into the right roles, and give those people the tools to succeed. Probably the one that unites them all is some rigor and analytics around people in organizations. Big, huge opportunity for us. So getting that right is going to matter. That's our biggest focus area right now.
Excellent. I think we have time for a few questions from the audience for Tom and Dennis, Lucy.
Who has had the greatest influence on your life other than your parents?
My wife. My wife is a senior partner at Boston Consulting Group, so I get free. You get this theme is developing. Tom gets free stuff. Maybe better, Tom takes advantage of free stuff. There's a free stuff we can all take, right? Tom's like, the harsher among you will be like, has this guy ever had an original thought? No, that's a very fair question. Because I talk about, going to our customers for ideas, going to my people for ideas, but my wife, it just, the ability to, what I find really valuable is, back to human capital analytics, we all have systematic biases. There's a bunch of ways in which we all think. And someone who understands those systematic biases, I think this can, in my case, it's my wife. It can, but it's also, I have several colleagues who understand this. Rich, our CFO, Melody, our CAO, my executive team, broadly know how I think about stuff. And therefore, understand where I'm likely to have biases, blind spots, gaps in my thinking and reasoning. And so, in addition to being, great life partner, someone I enjoy being with, the speed with which she can say, I know the way you're thinking about this problem, and you're, as always, you're underweighting this factor and overweighting this factor. So huge, huge, valuable business counselor that I get a ton of value from. And the reason I kind of went into a little depth there is you could take away one of two lessons, which is, wow, I should marry Tom's wife, which is not the lesson. The lesson is actually, find people and be sometimes spouse, life partner is exactly the right person. Sometimes it's a colleague at work, but someone who sort of knows your mental model and knows it well enough they can spot where you're likely to kind of make the same mistake or have a blind spot or not have a source of information. It's one I get. I'm realizing. You're old when ... Two of my colleagues have become grandparents this year, which is inconceivable. We're still a young in spirit company. The fact that I actually have grandparents was really exciting. And tell you, when it first happens, you waste an enormous amount. I'm like, show me the picture again. Like the kid's now 4 days old, and I'm like looking at pictures every day. And then when this first happens, but you're old when people start saying, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs and business people? It's kind of funny because it's sort of like, I've given up all hope you have any actual content, so I'm going to go with the advice to aspiring entrepreneurs question. But one of my most important is, to the extent possible, know yourself. It's one of the most important things, and know who you are, and just be honest with yourself about who you are, and surround yourself with people who complement that, because my wife's dad, before we got married, said, do you love this guy? And she said, yeah. I'm sure it was more emphatic than that. And he said something really wise, which was, do you love him the way he is? And she said, yeah. He said, yeah, it's because one of the big problems I see is people the most you can change someone is about 5%, he said. So, many people end up in these situations where they come in, hoping to engineer a 15 to 20 or 25% change in a person, and that just, he said, my fact base is that doesn't happen that much. I found that really useful in self-management, which is to say, I'd like to imagine I have limitless development potential, and I will change who I am, and and I really will this year. I don't have my list of things I'm gonna get done this year. Put the car keys in the same place every time I walk in the front door. That's been resolution 1 for 4 years running. There are car keys in the flower bed. There are car keys in my daughter's lacrosse bag, though she does not drive. There are car keys. I bought my first new car about 5 years ago, and so it's kind of funny. I think Mercedes has a line item of profit from charging me for new keys, because they have those keys you kind of can't make in a hardware store, and I just lose them. And I try. It's always on the resolution list. That's who I am, and if I can acknowledge that about myself and accept that's who I am, I can build a team of someone who actually remembers where the darn car keys are, and understand. And so my wife has been so valuable because she knows who I am, and she knows that my approach to any given situation is going to have some inherent biases. More broadly, know who you are, find people who complement you, who accept your strengths, who have their own strengths that complement you, because the most you're going to change is 5%.
Alan?
What is the role that in your life and that of your family and your company in giving back to the community and society at large?
I'll start with our company. This is something we take deadly seriously for really practical reasons. And it's probably the one exception. Tien mentioned that we're a low-key company. We were, partly by design, partly by accident, we're probably the least branded billion-dollar company you've ever heard of, right? Or never heard of, probably. This is probably the one area where we were incredibly forceful about our activity. For a really practical business reason. Really two practical business reasons. Our data is incredibly clear that the types of employees who we want to come work for us value this hugely. They value a social presence, they value commitment to causes, they value vehicles in place that help them self-actualize. Second, it's also, we're in a service business. Our experience is people are, and our data says people are wired to serve or they're not. If they're wired to serve, they can't stop serving. Like, they'll serve customers for 30 hours and say, there are hungry people, I better go feed them. And that's how they're wired. And so it's really important. So we think about, I'll start at the company level, sort of a wedding cake, if you will, of social engagement. I think we were the first company of our scale ever to just shut down for a day and go do a service project globally. So we had several thousand people at about 80 sites globally just doing stuff. And it was, no one was home. You kind of couldn't pick up the phone. What's funny is people who call us that day and got the message, you've reached the CEB residence, no one's home at this time, everyone's out shoveling dirt. Got really excited, so it inspired a lot of companies to go do that. It's now common. But group events, we push really hard to say, rather than take your team out for a happy hour, take your team out to go make a dinner somewhere, because it's a bonding experience. It de-hierarchicalizes the company. If you've ever seen me with up to my arms trying to make soup, it makes me more approachable. So we like those a lot. We then have a really large and active pro bono program through a variety of vehicles, but we have skills and data, and we both do a lot of things with small social entrepreneurs, but also big organizations like the Special Olympics, bringing our tools and resources to bear to help them run well. And then for our senior-most people, we train them and place them on boards. We have an internal social enterprise nonprofit board development program that we teach. I teach, Rich teaches, it's kind of, the leadership team teaches it. At that point, it starts to blend pretty closely with leadership development. Like, I would love to drop every one of our emerging leaders onto a Fortune 500 company board so they could learn about how a company works. I can't. But what I can do is find something they're passionate about, give them the skills to go contribute, and they can learn about running an enterprise from a different perspective. So, and then we drop money on top of all three of those layers of the wedding cake. Personally, it's funny, one of the other things I strongly believe is our company's social commitment should reflect our business strategy and our employees' priorities, not mine. You wouldn't find the 17th Tee Foundation, Tom's special, Tom loves the 17th tee of every golf course. We're going to make sure he plays every one. So our stuff is, Sharon and I are really focused on things that often in areas of greatest stress facilitate the active engagement of girls and women in economic and civic life. Back as to why, because it's the single best return on dollar you can get from an economic and social development perspective. Societies that educate women, societies that engage girls, societies that ensure that women have rights that they can exercise, so many good things happen from that point forward from an economic development perspective. So you'd find, and we extended a little bit beyond women, but it's still a big focus of what we do. So Sharon's been very active in Women for Women International, still on the board there. I'm helping Sheldon Himmelfarb lift Peace Tech Labs out of the U.S. Institute of Peace, because they do a lot of work on conflict prevention at a local level, which again creates huge economic outcomes. Capital abhors uncertainty. So if you have potential for violence, capital won't flow. Without capital, there's no jobs, period, full stop. We go looking for high ROI solutions. We've been active at our universities, but again, mostly funding programs that put young women leaders into situations where they can learn about the fact that sometimes what they've enjoyed is not the case. And active in our kids' schools and their commitments. It's philanthropy is a vehicle to stay close to them. That's two different buckets. There's some overlap between the two, but we do try to keep them separate.
I think we have time for one more. Kendrick?
When there's final decisions on you to make an important decision, how often is it a decision versus that?
So the question is, when it's up to making a decision, how much of your decision is gut versus looking at the data?
This is it's a loaded question for a guy who runs a data and analytics company, right? I mean, there's you should. The way our data scientists would answer the question is to say, anytime you're predicting, it's still only probabilistic, right? There's never, we analyze everything under the sun in corporate life such that if you're making 100 of a decision, you're hiring 100 salespeople, and right now 70 of them are great, I can say with a high degree of certainty, use our tool, 80 of them will be great. We're going to take your odds up. The big decisions you're talking about, you're only making one. Do this acquisition or not. I don't get to make it 100 times at once, in which case the analytics will always get you to the right answer. So they tend, ultimately, you bring a lot of data to bear. I'd never want to proceed into those conversations without a rich data set upon which to architect the conversation. But equally important are two other factors. One is the perspective of your team, including back to people who know you, who think differently. That's the, if you haven't had a robust, if everyone agrees about a big decision, I think we're in a lot of trouble. There's nothing more terrifying than when you're making a decent sized decision, we sit down and everyone's like, I'm in. What could go wrong? Because that's when the piano is most likely to fall. The piano almost falls. I'm showing my age. Grew up watching cartoons where invariably the piano. Evidently there were a lot of pianos going up into New York City skyscrapers. But the piano falls on your head the second someone's. Everyone's sort of like, we agree, right? That's so. Active dissent. Cultivating an obligation to dissent among your leadership team is really important. You want to have it out. If we agree, stop. We're missing something. Someone go back and do more work. So data first, dissent second, and then commitment third, I think, which is, if we've had good dissent and we've had a bunch of conversations and we sort of say, it's resting with me, I'm putting my thumb on the scale, it's a go. I think then you want to say, we're in it, right? We're burning the boats. There's no, and from the second that decision gets made, whatever team A, team B conversation we were having, even if we had to engineer it, ends. We're locking arms and we're going after it. So that commitment moment is also really important. Any decision I make, I'm committing the resources of the organization, whether it's capital, operating expense, effort, high potential employees are going to get reassigned. These are all scarce. The scarcest is the people by an order of magnitude. No get capital. But we're going to direct people who are working on pet projects for people around the table today are all going to be working on this thing tomorrow. And so that moment of commitment is every bit as important as the first two. But I think those are the three legs of a good decision stool. Great data that supports a fact-based argument. An argument, alignment too soon, I'll say it one last time, scares me. It means we've missed something. Like there's, if it were easy money, somebody else would have figured it out already. So what's the whole, what's the logic flow, what's the dissent, what are we, what groupthink are we falling victim to? And then third, commitment, which is, okay, we're going, arms locked, there was no debate. It was unanimous, and we're moving fast. That's the architecture of a good decision. Do we get it right every day? Obviously not. And even when you do them all right, do you still walk outside and say, hey, I thought it was sunny. Oh, that's a piano. I mean, it still happens. But if you have those three component parts, I think you feel pretty good.
Well, you're obviously getting it right most of the times because you guys are on a roll, and congratulations on that.
Terrific.
And on behalf of everybody in the room, really thank you for your insights. And